Get cunt whack!
The beginning of 2016 was for me a really sad time, which is why I decided to spend the winter in Rhodes, in the place that I like the most, the legendary Marco Polo Mansion, where its exuberant owner, Miss Effie, likes to lull and feed me, and from time to time even educate me, by suggesting a reading written by someone who gave the name to the inn. As far as I could understand from the title, it was inspired to a Venetian economist who had made a fortune by trading with the Far East. When I returned home, I still knew little about economics, but it flashed into my mind the idea to retrace the footsteps of the Venetian, thus dusting off the old legendary skill road. Reason why I called urgently a summit among Italy, Swiss and Germany at the highest level. At the meeting, beside myself, medical doctor, dreaming explorer, with a rough personality, participated Ralf Kirchhoff from Germany, athlete, actor, model, whose look had turned as of many Teutonic Valkyrias, and finally Armando Lanaro from Switzerland, who in addition to bringing the scientific, technical and educational material for the summit, is a scientist from the old school of Via Panisperna, now at the CERN of Geneva, where he has been working to the Gelmini project, a sort of underground bicycle path for neutrinos linking Switzerland to the Gran Sasso in Italy. At the end of the alcoholic meeting, we had taken an important decision concerning the Silk Road. The only missing was the choice of the transportation means. The option to go by foot was quickly discarded. Maybe a good choice, but was considered really too slow. The idea of using a SUV was not even considered because contrary to our deeply ecological spirit. The camel, rather exotic and interesting, presented unpleasant problems, a stinking smell and an unbearable breath. Finally, in line with our spirit, we all agreed to use bicycle. Basically, all had been decided, the itinerary and the mean of transportation, but more importantly, we all agreed on the trip motivation. We decided to cycle the Silk Road to raise money for MOAS, an NGO that strives in the rescue of migrants at the sea. The geographic area of the journey was that part of Asia, once under the Soviet regime, in between the Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan, along a 1,000-mile itinerary which, after traversing a couple of high mountain ranges, would have taken us to Bishkek, the capital of Kyrgyzstan, starting from Dushanbe, the capital of Tajikistan. The departure date was set for April 24, 2016. As for the bikes, the rider of the Salsa Fargo called La Poderosa was me. Armando would be the rider of the Kona Big Row named Frida. And finally, the surly karate monkey nicknamed Brunilde would be conducted by Ralf. A few simple words before departure.
1500 km a Bishkek. Abbiamo le borracce piene. È giorno e indossiamo occhiali da sole. Andiamo!
For the following weeks, we would have gone through desertic and inhabited lands, deep gorges, crossed by swollen river, on whose banks appear semi-abandoned villages, eating out on long and endless climb, beating our legs. To reach over 3,000 meters where the toll had not yet started, to arrive with equally endless descent at breakneck speed in areas where the temperature went from 0 of the mountain to 40 degrees of the desert, biking mostly along dirty roads. It was going to be a journey that would have put strain on our strength and determination, but that it ended up in further strengthening our friendship and most of all giving us the opportunity to discover new country and people, unknown to us till then, but of an unusual kindness, hospitality and humanity that touched and surprised us from the very first day and continued all along the trip, and it will remain forever in our memories. And so in Dushanbe, after placing the cup of the local beer on the bike fork and it refueling for the camper stove, we were ready to start our adventure. But we not even had time to warm up the muscle that we got immediately confronted to a 30 kilometers long climb over the first pass that led us on the northeastern edge of the Pamir chain to an unlight scary tunnel nicknamed by locals the Tunnel of Death. How to say, an uphill start under all point of view. But then we went down at breakneck speed on equally endless descent through towering gorges trapped between high mountains, 5,000 meters high, to reach the vast plain north of the Tajikistan that for a few days accompanied us and led us right to the border to Kyrgyzstan. The first village worth its name at the end of the descent was Istarvazan, where we found a very cozy shelter. And it was here that Armando, like John Belushi in The Blues Brother, convinced to have seen the light broke into a folk dance the same evening. I honestly remember Belushi never different, even though I must admit that even the band did not resemble that of James Brown. At the dawn, after resuming our journey, we pedaled east on easy roads through village and town with unpronounceable names, where we ran into frequently lively and colorful markets, and where the only possible language, which our Santis friend seemed familiar with, was that of gesture. In the town of Istebars, we were hosted in an annex to the village mosque, where we could stay and spend peaceful night by taking advantage of comfortable mattresses we have been offered. The few words exchanged in English with the imam made us realize that in order to eat we would have to bike quite a few more kilometers.
The town is not far from here, 20 kilometers from our village.
But with great hospitality our host shared with us the very little they had for supper, some hot tea, strawberries and mulberries, as well as he provided us with warm water with to refresh and wash out a bit of dust. In the morning we took to direction Isfara, near the Kyrgyz border, going across several up and down, in my opinion more up than down, and following a semi-desert and inhabited path where rocky mountain and hill keep changing color and shape, making the landscape quite surreal. Around us nothing, nothing barren, the barren nothing. Now, Isfara is located a few kilometers from Kyrgyzstan, but despite that we still managed to complicate our life, misled by confusing direction signs that either don't exist at all, or if they do are written in an alphabet totally strange to us. And so, of the two borders, one open and one closed, we were directed to the closed one, where, even if polite and smiling, the border soldiers crossed their arm and blocked the passage to us. In a nutshell, it turned out to be an extra 30 kilometers to add to the overall 1,000 miles planned for the trip before we were able to reach the border nearby Batkek, where to carry out the usual exhaustive custom formalities. Once we finally arrived at Batkek, we were just in time for lunch. Here we found a nice restaurant with very friendly and familiar atmosphere, where to taste the local cuisine. The only difficulty was the menu spelled in Cyrillic. Fortunately, some explanatory picture helped guiding our choice. And finally, Osh, a 3,000-old city located on one of the crossroads of the Silk Road. Nothing is left, unfortunately, of the ancient ruins, and even the very old bazaar, where perhaps even Marco Polo stopped, is now just a big and lively outdoor market where the city commercial life seems to unfold and where there is a bit of everything, from fresh bread to colorful spices and clothes. Here, the historical and ancient caravans of merchants are only vague and distant memories. And promptly Armando thought of buying the most typical Silk Road souvenir, even though that at a close look it gave me the impression of something more like a China polyester. The harshest mountains were approaching, even though we still had some days ahead of us not too demanding, with mostly soft up and down, and with little road traffic. Few cars and some old truck. Right, exactly. Some old truck, indeed so old as to require often mechanical work, that gave us the opportunity to nicely show our spirit of perennial Samaritans.
Aiutami! Guardami! Bastava la salita.
In between the many up and down and the quick shock, we found ourselves with the head turning like a spinning top, and tired enough to fall asleep sweaty on the grass along the roadside. And finally there come the mountains, the real ones we thought climbed, and so once again I had to find a way to cheer up my traveling companion.
Sergio, ma sei sicuro che ce la faremo trovare questa meccanica?
Ralf, noi siamo in missione per conto di Dio.
Ma tu sei sicuro che di strada avevano questo cappello?
Oh, è quello che ho trovato, ragazzi, è così, facciamo questo. Va bene. Dai, pronti a partire.
And it took a few pedal strokes to see the road climb up steep, and then finally, after a bend, it appears another mountain pass, up at the very top where the snow hardly melt down. And when it does melt, then endless stream of water spill out along the dirt roads, making the climb very painful, and the tires, generally snubbly, struggle to bite the ground and the mud. And suddenly the temperature dropped close to zero, forcing us to wear heavy clothes. And if the climb was thought, the descent was treacherous. Mud walls of snow on a slippery ground, where one needed attention and balancing coordination to avoid ending all of a sudden on the butt. The way down was a steep descent trail without side protection, where a wrong braking can be costly, so better to avoid a sort of last-minute braking of Valentino Rossi style, which would get you to the bottom of the valley in a few seconds via the most direct path. And since 9% of the country are mountain, reaching to villages by bike would often take longer than a single day. And so we had to pull out our sleeping tent that, when it does not rain, there is no wind, and is not dead freezing, can also be defined as comfortable. But, as usual, Murphy's Law got us even this time. Cold, rainy and windy all night long. We felt we would have been much better off wearing wool pyjamas instead of sleeping with all our clothing on, but at least readily dressed to restart on the following morning. Starting again in the morning, without even warming up, on a 10% climb, loaded like mules, and under a constant rain cannot be called the best way to start the day. But we were on the Silk Road traces, and this gave us a great push and motivation.
Certo ragazzi, vista così sembrano montagne brulle, aride. Invece qui ci sono millenni di storia, un tragitto antico, ci passò Marco Polo. Queste montagne sono cariche di storia, questa terra è carica di storia. Ma Sergio, sei sicuro che quella è terra? Guarda le mucche. No, primo ruscello che troviamo, se ci fermiamo un attimo. Direi che...
We went over days and days on a sort of back-in-time journey, traversing passes and valleys where human presence was scarce, and only rarely one could see the hues of nomads far away. Always wet days where the tracks were turning often into muddy paths that the tire would catch and through at our backs and all over our luggage. It took some time to find a safe and warm shelter in a house where a very polite lady welcomed us, even though she gave a first questionable look when she saw us loaded and dirty. It had become clear that it was urgent to wash the bicycle and lubricate gears and chain, which after so many kilometers in deep mud were making worrying noise. We thanked the family for their warm hospitality and offered chocolates and a few toys to their sweet oriental-looking children. The high mountain passes were not over yet. In the pungent cool air of the morning, we resumed soon our climb on dirt and rough road that, after crossing a narrow valley, presented to us a long series of turns that seems endless. I remember that I counted 33, and that took us up again over 3,000 meters of altitude. From the mountain, all around the horizon we could see the high top of the Celestial Mountain, and behind them, far to the east borders, the immense Chinese territories. And who knows whether Marco Polo 70 centuries ago went exactly along these roads. The pass just north of Narin was the next to last to climb, and most importantly the last on dirt road. From now on the long descent would have taken us 1,000 meters lower, at temperatures less rigid, and frankly we were also hoping to place less heat by rain. We had biked for several days in the wet, and before waiting for mushroom to grow inside our socks we thought it would have been time to dry out our socket clothes. Small setbacks are never lacking, and even on this trip we were not spared. But 4 holes and a blown-up tire on a journey on this kind was not too bad. At the end of the descent the landscape changed drastically, and as expected the temperature went up again. We then traversed for several tens of kilometers a long esplanade hit by strong wind, with almost no vegetation, and where the only human traces were some isolated grave and some rare abandoned settlements. On May 5th, the Kyrgyzs celebrate their constitution, and we decide to be respectful on this important day by wearing holbaks, the traditional Kyrgyz hat. We had almost reached our destination, a few hundred kilometers ahead of us. In the small villages we are able to get drink and food, which for Ralf was never enough. And so during a stop we had fun letting try our sophisticated bikes to some locals. Meanwhile a child, not all interested in the bike, enjoyed encouraging by giving us a warm 5.
Ragazzi, stiamo per entrare in un villaggio. Questa è gente tosta, sono ex nomadi. Anche Marco Polo ne parlava con rispetto e attenzione, per cui prepariamoci. Perché sporchi può andare bene, ma disordinati mai.
Now, I'm not sure whether to attribute it to the coming, but anyway we did receive a warm welcome from a Kyrgyz family who offered us comfortable beds for the night. But especially in the morning they made for us a fantastic breakfast with hot tea, warm bread and honey, to the delight of everyone, but especially of the perpetually hungry Ralf. It took another day to reach the small town of Kochor, squeezed in between the mountains, and to gradually get to the shores of the Issyk-Kul lake by the blue water that appeared to us all of a sudden at our side. The huge lake, the largest at the high latitude after that of Titicaca because of the salt and deep water, maintained throughout the year a temperature high enough not to freeze, not even in the coldest winter.
Così di fretta pedalando con ardore, le gambe snelle, tornite belle, m'hanno già messo la passione dentro al cuore.
Struck by the example of a local, Armando decided it was time to fill the water and take a long, refreshing bath. Perhaps too refreshing, and the good purpose indeed lasted very little and he quickly changed his mind. And finally the last climb, that began with slopes, how to say, quite good, on a road that, at least for the first kilometers, was paved. But it did not seem real to Kyrgyzstan to make things easy, so here comes again the rain that pounded us all along the 20 kilometers climb, which went wounded surrounded by a bucolic landscape. Then the asphalt disappeared, a turn into a dirt track that brought us to the last mountain pass of the journey, where, just for completeness, we were greeted by a generous hailstorm. I don't know if it is worth saying, but of course there was absolutely no shelter all around. On the way down, the hail at least stopped bombarding our head and causing headaches, while the variable weather kept changing, alternating rainy to very rainy. Frankly, it didn't matter anymore. We were less than a day from our goal. And despite the rain, we even found enough motivation to do a small detour to reach and admire the Burana Tower, positioned in the middle of a plain for more than 8 centuries, which represent all the remains of the ancient city of Balasagun. And of the original 45 meters of the ancient minaret, only 25 survive. But given that almost nothing survived of the ancient ruin and historical monuments in Kyrgyzstan, it would have been a crime to miss this one. Our journey along the Silk Road was really coming to its end. The night before the party, May 12, we celebrated Armando's birthday and he invited us to the most stylish restaurant in Bishkek town. After all, we deserve it. And for the occasion, being in an Islamic country, we celebrated with multiple water toasts. Obviously not sparkling water.
Che vergogna. Ragazzi, la pioggia della scorsa notte ci ha fatto un bel regalino. Mamma mia.
E la strada com'era?
Impegnativa, direi.
Di M o di fango? Viene bene il risotto?
Speriamo di sì, che avremo anche fame.
Sì, Così?
È lui che corre e lo tiene in mano.
Huh? Never done. I don't know. Never done.
E al mio segnale scatenate l'inferno. Oh ragazzi, ho detto il mio segnale però!
Era meglio l'altra.
Facciamola subito, dai, che tanto siamo in registrazione, rifacciamola subito.
Era meglio